is the Rocky Road Podcast.
Larry Walker, make it three! Wow!
Brought to you by rockspile.com.
Swung on and bounced on one hop off the glove of Arenado. From his knees, throws to first and got him.
Blackmon to third. Throw coming to the plate is out of time! An inside the park home run for Charlie Blackmon.
And lifted in the shallow left. Diving grab made by Trevor Story.
High drive one high and deep right field. Get up and get out. Has done it. The Rockies win it.
Melanson's pitch.
Drive to left field. Going back is Slater. It's gone. Now, here's your host, Jake Shapiro.
Welcome into the Rocky Road Podcast. Great to be talking to you again. After a week off, I was sick and lost my voice. Perfect timing considering it was right after the baseball season ended. But missed you guys. Don't think we missed too much in that week, but I have been sitting on a very special episode, and this is that. I caught up with general manager of the Colorado Rockies, Jeff Bridich, while I was in Milwaukee covering the NLDS. That interview is in this podcast, as I promised. The soonest episode after the Rocky season ended would be that, and this is that. This podcast can be found on That's Good Podcasts. Special shout out to Brandon Perna. That's on YouTube, part of his That's Good empire. And it is good, trust me, except the team he covers most, the Broncos, has not been that good. But we got the Nuggets coming soon, and they're going to be good, and that's fun. I'm excited for the Nuggets. You can also find it on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, essentially everywhere you find a podcast, Google Play. If you are not getting this at your preferred podcast listening destination, make sure you email me, rockyroadpodcast@gmail.com, or hit me up on Twitter at Shapalicious, and I will try to get that fixed. Want this to be as easy and as listener-friendly as always. And, of course, now that we're in the off-season, I will take any and all questions. Let's be upfront and transparent. Not much going on, so if you want me to riff on anything, I will do it. So just let me know what you want me to talk about, and I'll go there. If not, I'll come up with some topics. And the way my brain works, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know I will go some places. Anyway, on this episode, I've got Jeff Bridich, the general manager, like I said. I also want to talk about Jon Gray. I've got some audio from him from right after the Rocky season ended. Pretty raw audio of Jon. Disappointed in just about everything, and I'm going to explain what happened with Jon Gray based on some information I have, some things that have not been released yet to the public, and there are some things I know that I'll talk around and talk about, and I think it'll be informative to you, the listener. There's also a lot going on with the Nolan Arenado situation. The Post wrote a story about 5 days ago. You know, the Kiz-Saunders column, should they trade Nolan Arenado, yes or no? Each took a side, that type of thing. I have my opinions on that. And that will be in an upcoming episode, and I do think the Rockies should trade Nolan Arenado, but there is a whole process that they should take leading up to that, and it will make sense if you listen to my explanation. So that is coming in the coming days, but I want to keep these podcasts tight in the off-season. I plan to do one a week, and if anything happens, like let's say the Rockies sign DJ Lemahieu, I will do that as soon as I possibly can right after that news is announced. Okay, so Jeff Bridich in Milwaukee. Jeff has been the GM of the Rockies since late in 2014, I believe. And the Rockies have gotten better in every single one of Jeff's years. Before that, he was the head of the minor league system, essentially, for the Rockies, and he oversaw the drafting of basically every single guy that's playing for the Rockies now that was drafted by the Rockies. And because of that, he's either drafted everyone on the Rockies, signed them internationally because he was part of that system, or traded for them as the GM or signed them in free agency. So he has completely built this team, in a way that is more unique than most GMs, I could say, that have either bounced from organizations or even stuck with an organization but weren't as involved in the things that made this team as important as it has. And I think it's fair to say that there have been missteps and there have been roaring successes from Bridich, whether you want to look at trading for Herman Marquez as basically a throw-in in the Corey Dickerson, Jake McGee deal, which, as I've said for a long time, was told on that day that it wasn't a throw-in, but, that's what everyone thought it was. Or, the signing of Ian Desmond and how much of an utter disaster that has been, particularly this past year where he made $22 million to be arguably the worst player in Major League Baseball that had that many at-bats and played the most games on the Rockies. But he's also signed Bud Black. He got Bud Black here, and I think we can all agree in saying that Bud Black is a huge reason why the Rockies have been successful. And you might be saying, Jake, you just said that they played Ian Desmond more than anyone in baseball, and Buddy makes the lineup. Yes and no. I mean, you can say that there's definitely some pressure on Bud to play his highest paid player who's a veteran, and if he doesn't, there are consequences, not just for, Bud's got to play this guy. It's more of he's an older guy and you're going to lose him in terms of the clubhouse if you don't play him. So in terms of navigating a lot of the obstacles that went on with this Rockies season, I think Bud Black did an amazing job, and I was even more impressed with him this year than I was last season, and obviously I was uber impressed. He's going to be an NL Manager of the Year candidate 2 straight years, finalist probably. So you can look at Jeff Bridich and see, I think, a lot more positives than negatives, but some of those negatives have been huge negatives, and I think a lot of us have seen some of the things the Rockies have not done, whether that was actually something they could do or could not do, like bringing in Wilson Ramos or a left-handed reliever at the deadline this year. And, Bud Black even said in the NLDS, completely unprompted, they looked at doing more for this team. And I believe him. Of course the Rockies are going to try and get the best team possible. I mean, even the Red Sox, who had an unbelievable record this year, probably wish they probably could have done more at the deadline this year. But these moves come at a certain cost, right? These moves come at a certain cost, and for the Rockies, those costs were too great. And whether that's right or wrong, that's for us to decide, and for the Rockies to decide, and, to go back on and look at in hindsight and 20/20 vision. But the Rockies have been to back-to-back postseasons, and it's the first time that's ever happened in franchise history, and it's been under Jeff Bridich's leadership. So once again, I think that you could say overall his tenure as the Rockies GM has been way more positive than it has been negative. And one of the unique things is he is just not a guy that talks a lot. I mean, I haven't talked to him much, and I'm around every day. But that's his style. He's got Bud Black to speak for him, and he's got some other people in the Rockies organization. And it's panned out fine, but any opportunity that you get to speak to someone that has that type of power, you get to learn things. And I had that opportunity before Game 2 of the NLDS in Milwaukee. Obviously, he's talking about some things that they wanted to do in this current postseason, but I had a feeling that it wasn't going to last long, so I asked him a bunch of hypothetical questions, a bunch of, circumstantial questions, and I think you can learn some things off of what Jeff Bridich said in this. It's a lot of things you've heard before from him if you've listened to him talk before, but it hammers home what's important to him, and it's a different approach than what's being had by the, so to speak, calculator, algorithmic GMs elsewhere in baseball. Jeff Bridich has been confused for that guy, but he is not that guy. Yes, he uses algorithms, but I think it's pretty clear that the Rockies' thinking, whether you look at signing Ian Desmond or re-signing Charlie Blackmon, has been, or even the Wade Davis move, has been completely different than almost every team in baseball. And that, to me, signals something, because I've been told by people in baseball that a lot of the contracts that were being offered last offseason, not as a part of collusion, but more so as a part of all these teams have the same talent evaluation system and value evaluation system. A lot of these guys were being offered similar contracts that were free agents last year. So, the Rockies, in terms of trades and free agency, I think that's why you see them having a hard time making trades, having a hard time fitting in, so to speak, in free agency, and having the media understand what's going on, because their evaluation system is different, and that starts with Jeff Bridich. So I caught up with Jeff Bridich, and he stresses what's important to him as the general manager of the Colorado Rockies.
With Bud Black, how well has that decision worked out? Can you take me behind the scenes of what he's done for the organization as a whole?
Well, I'm not going to take you specifically behind the scenes because I'd have to kill you. But you know, I think we can all say it's worked out very well. There is a lot that goes on in the clubhouse behind closed doors. There's a lot that, just the conversations and the thought and the work and the preparation and all things that aren't necessarily front and center to what people see all the time. He's got mastery of so much of that, all of that, and he's got ways of communicating to people and with people and having people hear him, and there's just a lot of experience there, and it's to this point, it's worked out spectacularly for us, and it's been a really good fit. He and the coaches work well together. I think he and Mike Redmond in particular work very well together. In terms of the thinking that goes on in game in the dugout. So, to this point, it's been great.
His expertise in pitching and having essentially 3 pitching coaches and a former catcher on the staff, how have you seen that meshed with the high quality of talent you've drafted and developed? I mean, obviously Freeland and Marquez and a couple other guys, but how have you seen it from your perspective?
Well, Buddy would be the first to tell you that he sees the game through a pitcher's eyes. So I think he has so much experience and so much perspective there, and our pitchers realize that, and so they've drawn on that over time, and to have a guy that really truly has gotten to know these pitchers, whether the starters or relievers, and have come to believe in them and know how to push them when they need to get pushed, and pull back when things need to get pulled back a little bit. There's a lot of nuance there, and there's a lot of feel that goes into those sorts of things, and so he's really got. But he has those sort of abilities in spades, and it helps the overall growth process for a group of pitchers, and we have absolutely benefited from that over the last couple of years.
In terms of team building, what have you learned here the last few years? 2 consecutive postseason runs, some retooling here this past offseason. What have you learned about, since you came into now and moving forward, about what's important to Jeff Bridich?
There's a lot of stuff that we've learned. Winning games and being a part of big games, there are a lot of lessons to be learned there. The fun of it is one thing for this group. I think some of the challenges and the difficulties of it too, whether it's the pressure, tension, or stress, or facing good teams, or the travel, and actually what playoff baseball and what postseason baseball feels like. that the last couple of years, that's been great for us. But there's been a build-up to that, and you know, we had to do certain things before we got to this point. And there's been, you know, there's too much to talk about right now, but, you know, I think that probably the biggest thing that I personally learned is just how much work and how many people are involved in what goes on to take us from where we were, you know, 4 or 5 years ago to, you know, to what's going on now. You know, we've had to have so much work and also a little bit of luck along the way and some good fortune. So, you know, I mean, we feel real fortunate that those things have kind of you know, come together the way that they have over time, and we're still, you know, it's not like we have everything figured out. I mean, you know, there's always going to be things to learn. There's always going to be things to get better at and grow at, and we have unfinished business here. I mean, it's not like we're happy and resting on our laurels and saying, hey, look, we're a postseason team. I mean, we're here to win it, and I think that's a great hallmark of this group and the coaching staff and everybody else involved.
Something you're hinting at right there is something you said in your first press conference with the Rockies is winning begets winning, and I think that's been your motto basically here. So you look at the build-up of this club the last few years, you know, more and more wins in the minor league system. I think it's been stressed talking to Glenn Allen Hill that it's not just about development, but it's about actually winning ball games. How have you seen that play out?
Well, understanding, I mean, you know, there comes a point in a professional player's career and a coach's career or a manager's career, you know, in the minor leagues where, you know, you need to figure out how to win games, right? And there's so much consistency in baseball in terms of how games play out and, you know, what happens during games over the course of a long season, you know, and to be able to master some of those moments as a player or as a coach, manager, whatever, that actually tip that scale from a loss to a win, you know, there are lessons there. Those things are learned over time. It doesn't just, you know, just snap your fingers and it happens. And so, you know, those things have to be real experiences and part of a professional career also. And, you know, and it's easier to do at the minor league level. It's more difficult to do here at the ultimate level where the spotlight's brighter and there's, you know, ultimately more at stake. But really, it comes down to the group, you know, at the core. I mean, the basest and most basic core element of that, you know, when that happens is that there's some sort of belief in the group that we should be good and we should be winning and we should be this, that, hey, look around, we are as good or better than almost everybody else we play. And that is, I think, something that has grown into a reality in this group over the last couple of years, and that's really fundamental, and that's key to continuing that in terms of winning and winning and winning and winning.
I got one more for you. In building this consistent team, like you said, and giving yourself the best chance to win it every single year, and not only getting here, but going to the ultimate goal, what do you think in terms of talent is the most important thing for you guys to continue to keep or get? Is it pitching?
I mean, I think, you know, I've said this before, I think we're always going to be searching for as much really good pitching as, you know, I've said that many times. As much good pitching as we can get, we're always going to be interested in search of that. But, no, look, I don't think you can necessarily point to one thing. I mean, you know, pitching can be challenging in our ballpark at certain times and in our division at certain times. I mean, you know, Arizona plays in an offensive park too. And so, you know, it's important for us, I've said it before, it's important for us to be able to pitch when we need to pitch and to turn batted balls into outs and play good defense behind our pitching. I think those two keys have helped us become a playoff team. You know, but then that's not to say that offense isn't important, and a lot of different pieces have to fit together. So, you know, as rosters change and as players come and they go and they grow or they get traded or whatever, and the roster changes, I mean, so do your needs, right? And it's sometimes players get hurt and players get cancer, and you have to make an adjustment. And so, stuff happens, and ultimately you're looking for the right people.
Just one quick follow-up on that. Is there something you do to just get a more consistent offense? I know the guys in there believe they're a talented group, and we see the names, and I think you see the names as well, and as Buddy said, but there have been times this year where there have been lulls, like really big lulls. What do you do? Maybe is it something that has to be addressed in the off-season, or do you try to change things in season, maybe in-house even?
Yeah, I think in the moment, you try to get guys to relax and remember that they're really good. And a lot of times hitters give too much credit to pitchers, and pitchers give too much credit to hitters, and sometimes you find yourself as a team, the group is in that kind of a situation where let's not overcomplicate things, let's not give too much credit to these pitchers, let's go out and remember that we're a good team, we're a good group. And sometimes during the course of a long season, that's tougher to do than other times. We're going to go through, just like we will with our pitching and defense and everything else, we'll go through a very similar process in terms of evaluating our offensive group and our needs for next year, once we're done with the postseason, and we'll take that step by step like we always do.
Jeff, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You can read most of that interview over on roxpile.com. They sponsor the show. They're where I get my credential from to write about such things and get the access. But the last quote there from Jeff, it was the only one I didn't include in my story because it didn't really fit the rest of the narrative. And it's the quote that you guys were all waiting to hear. What about the offense that only scored 2 runs in 3 games and was largely atrocious all year? And I sometimes wonder whether my own opinions get slanted by some of the things that I am told. Because you heard that quote from Jeff. And it's very similar to some of the things I've been saying, right? At some point, the players got to step up. At some point, we can't just blame the general manager, coaches, etc. At some point, if you are Wade Davis, if you are Brian Shaw, you have to realize you've been a great player before, and that greatness is somewhere within you, and you have that talent. And Wade Davis realized that through his rough patch and got back to being a great player. Brian Shaw, yet to. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, Matt Holliday was really good for the Rockies this year. Cargo is obviously a different player now, but he's only 31. It's not like he's that old. He hit a wall. His age curve hit him really quick. And maybe it's because of the injuries. Now, the only 2 guys I could think of that he's saying, if you're, that type of player, you've got to be better, etc., are DJ Lemahieu and Charlie Blackmon, because they were just up and down all year. Now, what I will say with DJ Lemahieu, and this is why I caution maybe even signing him long-term, is that thumb injury he had affected him all year. And I've talked to guys who have had that thumb injury who are former big leaguers and say their thumbs still don't work the same way. I don't know if DJ can come back to being the hitter that we know he was. Obviously, the defense is still great. He should win the Gold Glove at second base this year because, well, Javi Baez is the best second baseman, but he didn't play primarily at second base this year. He played all over. DJ should be that guy this year. Charlie Blackmon, however, he also looked like he was playing through injury, but he did not have the year I think we all thought. Elsewhere in the Rockies lineup, was Jeff Bridich really counting on Gerardo Parra, Ian Desmond, Chris Iannetta to be those guys? David Dahl had a rough first half and then the injury and didn't really get back to being the player we know he can be until late in the season. But I'm with Jeff a lot of the way in saying, at some point, if you're a player, you got to be the one that steps up and takes accountability for being good. In the same sense, though, they did not have enough talent on the offensive side of the ball. And we've known that, at least I have, because I wrote about it for where I used to work right before opening day, 2017. They haven't had this talent for 2 years. They haven't had enough talent on the offensive side of the ball. In fact, the Rockies, by weighted runs created plus, which is a flawed metric, but it still standardizes things and it speaks, have had the 2 worst offenses to make the playoffs in the wild card era, back-to-back. I don't think they're that bad, but I think they obviously are bottom third of the league. I mean, down the stretch there, those last 3 guys in the lineup, really 6, 7, 8, 9, were automatic outs. And there has to be something disheartening about watching franchise figurehead after franchise figurehead, Nolan, DJ, Charlie, Holiday, Cargo, soon to be Story, just get completely obliterated by Milwaukee. I think it shows that the approach is flawed. That's where I'll call out Jeff Bridich. And I don't think that's that big of a hill to die on. No, I don't think he should be fired. No, I don't think he's doing a bad job. I just said it on the front end of that interview. I think he's doing a pretty good job. But I think his approach in terms of how the Rockies acquire talent and evaluate talent offensively needs to be shifted. They need to do something different on that side of the ball. Because whatever they're doing is not working. The only developmental success the Rockies have had offensively here, complete offensive developmental success here recently, is Trevor Story. David Dahl's not there yet. Their other guys aren't even at David Dahl's not there yet level. It makes you worry a little bit about Brendan Rodgers, Garrett Hampson, some of these other guys. Raimel Tapia, who knows at this point. But it needs to get better. And they need to have a better offensive club. And I think the pitching staff is going to be pretty much the same next year. I don't know that Freeland will be that good. I think Marquez will have the second half, but for both halves, I think he'll be amazing. I think Gray will be better. And I'll talk about Gray in just a second. Tyler Anderson, if he's healthy, will be awesome. And then you've got like 5 major league quality starters for that 5th starter spot, and then eventually you're going to have to turn some of these guys to permanent bullpen arms. And you can pretty much fill that Adam Ottavino role with one of those guys, whether it be Yency Almonte, DJ Johnson even, and Sang-Won Oh, without having to pay Otto. Or you could pay Otto and have a really good bullpen. I think Shaw and McGee will have better years. You know what? I'm going to walk that back on McGee. I don't know about McGee, but I think Shaw will have a better year. So the offense is the thing that needs to step up if the Rockies are to get to that 95-win, 100-win mark, which they so easily could have reached this year had they just had one more bat. Even if it was a decent one, a guy with a 1 or 2 WAR, I think it would have boosted their club in ways that would have been very beneficial. Because Bud Black got this team to the playoffs with a team that had a negative run differential entering the last week. And you might be scoffing at that mark, but it just shows how little room for error the Rockies had all year. Pretty much said for 5 or 6 times, every time they had an opportunity to win a game, they won it. Those losses were all losses, except for extra inning loss against Milwaukee, a couple losses in St. Louis, the Texas loss, and the LA hits 5 home runs off your bullpen. And maybe in Anaheim too. I mean, pretty much besides that, Every loss should have been a loss, and every win pretty much turned into a win. You didn't flip many games this year. You may have flipped a couple losses into wins, I should say. You probably flipped more losses into wins than wins into losses, if that makes sense. Speaking of developmental and successes or failures, the most interesting Colorado Rocky of 2018, and I think the most interesting in terms of where our eyes are going to be, and maybe it'll even dictate what the Rockies are in 2019 in terms of an elite team in the National League or just a good one, is Jon Gray. Here is Jon Gray just minutes after the Rockies lost Game 3 of the NLDS. Audio completely uncut. And he gets badgered a little bit here by the media, so just a fair warning. Here's Jon.
The foundation has been laid for the starting rotation going forward. If you perform, which I know you think you'll be.
Yeah, I think we've kind of established ourselves as a good pitching ball club. You see what Freeland and Marquez have done this year, and you know what a lot of our guys are capable of. Our bullpen, the way they pitched. So I think we've established that. People know we're a good pitching ball club now, and you know we need to do whatever we can to keep it that way. Strive.
So what about you at this point? It was certainly a roller coaster season for you. You know that.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you anything you don't know. What do you need to do to get back to being the Jon Gray you want to be over the winter and come back and, you know, have a complete season?
It starts with getting very strong. I'm going to get as strong as I can physically get this offseason, so that's going to be really fun. And I'm excited to see what I'm going to be able to do with it, because I've been strong before and I've been really good before, so I'm going to get back to what I do best.
Jon, what physically strong? Why does physical strength matter as much?
Because it plays an effect on everything, even your mind. So I think that's really good. And you know, I wasn't really healthy. My velo was down this year. You know, there wasn't a lot of good things with me. So I'm going to start with that. Have a good foundation to build off of.
Jon, you to me, and I don't know, you look like you've lost some weight. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you want to put on a little more bulk?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm down about 20 pounds this year. So
yeah, I was going to say, so
it's been a little tough. But
so what did you want to get? What would you like to get back to?
I would like to get back to 230, 235.
So you're what, 210-ish now?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that by design that you lost all the weight?
No.
Okay. Had some illness that you had to deal with?
Maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure. But, you know, my body kind of did a 180 this year. It was kind of tough to deal with. But, you know, I want to get under control and get back to being strong.
Do you have something planned for off-season routine, working with somebody, or?
Just lift as much weight as I can.
Great.
Thanks, Jon.
All right, so you finally heard Jon say what a lot of you were thinking, which was, did Jon lose weight? And yes, he lost about 20 pounds, as you heard. Obviously, this can have a lot of effects, from strength to velocity, and you heard him talk about how he just wants to spend this offseason in the gym getting a lot stronger. The subsequent question, which he avoided in that, was, why did you lose the weight? And I know that answer. Or at least I know part of it. And this is obviously a complicated issue with different sides, but I'll tell you what I know. And a lot of this hasn't been public, and I don't know what is and shouldn't be public here, but let me walk this line. So the Rockies in 2017 saw that they had a potential ace on their hands. And if you watched Jon down the stretch, you would have seen that too. He was spectacular. Unfortunately, the foot injury cost him the first half of the year in 2017. So one of the things they told him to do, one of the things Jon wanted to do as well, was stay healthy for all the year. And, you know, throw as many innings as he possibly could, which seems like a completely fair and reasonable thing, right? Now, here's where it starts to get weird. Because it was a stress fracture on Jon's foot, and because Jon is a little bit bulkier, they thought, and I don't know what Jon thought, but the consensus kind of was that, hey, let's have Jon lose a little bit of weight here, take a little bit of stress off his body. Completely reasonable thing. Teams ask their players to lose and gain weight all the time. We talk about it in football a lot, sometimes even in basketball. It doesn't happen much in baseball. But that's what they asked Jon to do. Jon did it. Now, one of the things, if you look at, that's cost Jon this year is his decreased velocity. And obviously having less weight and strength is going to decrease your velocity. So he's become less effective. Jon also dealt with a lot of stress this year because he was less effective. And if anyone knows about, poor performance at their job or anything that they care about dearly, it causes stress. And when you get stressed out, you sometimes get sick. And Jon was a little bit under the weather at times this year. And he lost some more weight. And the problem started to spiral. And then something else happened. And this is around the time he was sent to Albuquerque. And one of the reasons why he was sent to Albuquerque, and I talked about this, but since this is what everyone's going to listen to now, Darryl Scott is the AAA pitching coach for Albuquerque. And Jon Gray has a great relationship with him. Trusts him, not that he doesn't trust Darren Holmes or Steve Foster, but he works well with Darryl Scott. So they send him down there partially to just get back in line with Darryl Scott. And I think they probably wanted him to stay down longer, but I forgot who it was that got injured. I think it was Anderson, so they needed him to come back up right before the All-Star break. But one of the things that happened in that time period, and one of the things that I praised for the Rockies while he was in his good stretch in July and August, was that he was striking guys out less. And the reason that was good was because Jon was going to be able to throw more innings and less pitches and be more efficient. Now, Jon has never been a guy to be a ground ball pitcher. He is a pure strikeout pitcher. That's what they drafted. That's what they developed. And at times, they've had him stray away from it, and it's been an utter disaster every time they strayed away from it in the minor league level. They've also strayed away from it with different guys, whether it be Eddie Butler or Tyler Matzik. Now, when you look at those guys, Eddie Butler never had success at the major league level. Tyler Matzik had some anxiety issues. Real anxiety issues, not the ones that the media tries to portray about Jon Gray. And the thing that differs from Jon and Eddie Butler is that Jon actually was having success at the major league level, and very good success. And because they tried to change the pitcher he was, they went too far in adjusting that, and he lost his identity. So, was it the Rockies' plan to mess Jon Gray's 2018 up? No. But a spiral of events took place, a lot of them out of the team's control, a lot of them out of Jon's control, and conspired to have Jon have a pretty bad year. Started with a pretty inconspicuous plan to get Jon better, one that everybody was in agreement on, and it ended with Jon not having the velocity, not looking like the same guy, weight loss, not having the strength he wanted, and not knowing how to get outs the way he used to, and not knowing how to get outs the way they wanted him to. Because he wasn't that guy and isn't that guy. He's not Kyle Freeland. He's a strikeout guy. He's more Herman Marquez than he is Kyle Freeland. So the question here is, can Jon Gray be fixed? And I think, yes, very easily. It's just going to take some time and faith and trust. My biggest question is it going to be with the Rockies? And I'm 95% sure the Rockies are going to give him enough chances. So that just speaks to how much faith I have that Jon Gray is going to be back as a really good pitcher at some point. Whether that's a starter or a reliever, I don't know. I've been told for a long, long time that Jon might profile better as a reliever, and I can see it finally. Especially if you want him to get that strength back up and you don't think he's a guy that can throw 200 innings in a year. Maybe he profiles better as someone that's going max effort 98 with his fastball and slider all the time. But the developmental part that they want Jon to make of getting more ground ball outs and pitching longer innings, that will come with time. That comes with experience of pitching at the big league level. And I think they tried to make that process happen too quick. And that was the mistake. And once again, this isn't to say Jon's completely, not at fault here. It's the same thing I talked about earlier. I think at some point, someone of that talent needs to take a responsibility or anything in saying that they need to get back to being that person, but obviously there is a conspiracy of factors that went against the way he wanted it to work, and he's a young man. He's very young. And I can promise you this, he hasn't experienced that kind of adversity and that kind of trouble that he did this year at any point before, because he's a guy that's had a 98-mile-an-hour fastball since he was, a sophomore in high school. So he's always been better than everyone else. If Jon can bounce back from this, he will be much better. He will be mentally stronger, because we all like going the mental angle for some reason with Jon. But the question to me, when is that going to happen? Because this is someone that hasn't faced that. And you look at the reset button the Rockies gave him at AAA, it worked really well. Having the reset button of the offseason, I think, is going to benefit Jon Gray and getting away from it. And a lot has been made of comments Jon made while he was a minor leaguer and saying he's not the biggest baseball guy in the world, and he's not. And that's something you see at the major league level. A lot of these guys aren't as big of baseball nerds as you or I. But Jon is as competitive as any person in that locker room. And baseball's a competition. So he is going to care, and he's going to want to be the best he can possibly be. Does that explain it? If it doesn't, hit me up on Twitter at Shapalicious, and I'll try and do some more if that wasn't careful enough on the, high wire tiptoeing about what I know and what I can share. Anyway, like I said, follow me on Twitter at Shapalicious, email the show rockyroadpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you to That's Good Sports, That's Good Podcast, all that stuff from Brandon Perna, as well as Blake Street Tavern and Rocks Pile. I might head out to Blake Street Tavern for the Buffs game on Saturday when they play Washington. So if you want to go hang out, that's the place to do it. You'll probably run into me, or at least some of my friends. And you will know who my friends are, because they will be kind of like me and really weird and wearing Buff stuff. Anyway, thank you for listening to the show. I plan to do these once a week in the off season and anytime news breaks as well. Thank you for all the love, especially after the season ended. I was overcome by all the nice messages you guys sent me last Monday night. So thank you so much, and I will talk to you very soon.